Hey everybody, Pastor Ricky here. We all know as Christians we're commanded by Jesus to go out and share the gospel with others. Now, I've never really thought about these three concepts I'm going to talk about today, but I find this very interesting. I ran across an article written by Chad Hall for the Western Siminary blog titled Transformed, and this came out in August of 2012. And the title of his brief blog entry here is 3 Reasons We Should Not Share the Gospel. Now, if I'm honest, I've always kind of thought if you're sharing the gospel, that's a good thing. I didn't know you could share the gospel for wrong reasons. He asserts here in his article 3 reasons we shouldn't share the gospel, and those reasons are insecurity, arrogance, and narcissism. Now, some of this is convicting, and if I'm honest, I've even seen some of this kind of evangelism from a selfish standpoint. This week I'm going to be preaching on the topic, the monopoly of grace. So the idea is, who owns grace? Who owns God's grace? Who owns the gospel, so to speak? You know, God owns grace. It's His grace. It's not ours. It's not our gospel. It's His gospel. So check it out. He says some folks share the gospel out of insecurity. He says Christians are motivated at times to share the gospel because they are insecure. If only they could get someone else to go along with the gospel, then that would provide them with a bit more certainty and comfort. Shoring up their lack of security is really a poor reason to evangelize. You know, some people need to be validated, so to speak, and I could see how that could motivate them to share the gospel with others, to build their own security up. That's a wrong reason to be sharing the gospel. We need to be sharing the hope that is Jesus, proclaiming His truth for the benefit of others and the glory of God. Secondly, arrogance. Man, we've seen these arrogant Christians, right, and how they share the gospel. An arrogant evangelist assumes that he or she has considered everything worth considering, has formed the only opinion worth forming, and has reached the only conclusion worth reaching. This super, puffed up, arrogant person that knows everything. Now, such a person, get this is interesting, confuses Christ and His gospel. Christ and His gospel is perfect with his or her understanding, comprehension, and acceptance of the gospel. You see, we're all imperfect. It's His perfect gospel, and we are imperfect. We need Him. And he says here that he thinks our efforts at evangelism would be greatly served with a stout dose of humility. And with him, I'll agree. We can't move into the world and share the gospel from an arrogant standpoint. We know everything, and you too need to be like us and accept our views on everything. Man, let's give all the glory and honor and praise to God and His perfect gospel with a posture of humility as we share that with others. Again, for the benefit, the hope of others and to the glory of God, not selfish, puffed up arrogance. Thirdly, narcissism, closely tied with arrogance. The modern narcissist looks at others, man, we've seen this one, but can only see himself. In fact, we think at times, if we're not careful, that the world must reflect our image, be just like us. No, we need to be like Jesus. Look, we suffer from the temptation to make other human beings into objects. When we objectify another person, he or she, boy, this one hurts, guys, becomes a means to some other end that meets our own interest. This is the pastor driven by numbers. I want to share the gospel and reach others to puff my own self up. You see, the people that we're sharing the gospel with become means to an end that make us look good. Rather than sharing hope of Jesus, the hope of Jesus with them for their benefit and the glory of God, we make evangelism about us building our kingdom. Listen to this one. He says this, I know far too many evangelicals who see other people only as possible converts, objects in the evangelist quest to do something grand for God. I'd put it this way, another notch in the belt, another accomplishment for the evangelist. Oh, I've reached this many people, and the evangelism becomes self-centered, narcissistic, and arrogant to puff the person up rather than to help someone and to glorify God. So the conclusion is this, his conclusion. What do all these poor motivations have in common? Man, this is huge. Each one places the needs and interests of the evangelist ahead of the needs and interests of the other. Man, so self-centered. Evangelism should always be provoked by a sincere love of the other and by a servant-like attitude to them, and also in submission to God. Those are my words. So, man, he asked a few relevant questions. What about you? When have you been motivated to share the gospel for less than noble reasons, selfish reasons? Possibly to bolster your own security, to remedy your insecurity about your own beliefs, possibly because you're arrogant and you think you have all the answers and everybody else needs to hear what you have to say. Rather than sharing God's perfect gospel, you think you're perfect, or I would think I'm perfect. Or thirdly, just out of narcissism. Man, I'm trying to gain achievements for God, do something grand for God, another notch in the belt, another convert that I can brag about. Man, a very self-centered motivation. If we're not careful, we can be perceived as people that are like this, insecure, possibly arrogant or narcissistic, with an agenda for our own benefit, rather than just to, serve the needs of others and have their best interest at heart, and do it in submission to God. It's His perfect gospel. So with all that being said, it's rooted in this, though. Get it? Is it our gospel, or is it the gospel of Jesus? So, friend, the encouragement is this. Let's not be insecure. Let's not be driven by insecurity to share the gospel. Let's not be arrogant, and let's not be narcissistic. It's His gospel. It's His perfect gospel, and we're just simply His servants trying to help others find hope. We'll talk to you again soon.